What?
How come this is all news to everybody? I'll tell you why. It's because we've got an entire Leviathan out there to make sure you never find out any of this. Actually, what we're talking about here is actually quite high-end. It's quite esoteric. They don't even want you to get to that stage before they bring on the jugglers. And they've got every kind of distraction, every kind of placebo, every kind of bromide, you see, to make sure that this, even the questioning function, does not arise in your mind. And don't the scientists or biologists know that the overstimulated mind, because they study children now and they watch this, just the fact that you're overstimulated by the garbage they produce freezes your brain. We're talking about investigation, moving from an alpha and omega, what we would call thinking. Thinking's on its way out, folks. That's too much trouble. You can't think. They've so inundated your mind in exactly the same way that Schopenhauer and so many people explain, that you're incapable of real thought, let alone realizing the metaphysical fact that actually the very act of thinking is for self-discovery. That's not even, that's too far. But here we are breaking the consensus. There are people who will stand out, who will learn to say no, right? Another way to explain the age of revealing is to say that it's the spirit of rebellion that is abroad in the world. And people who really know my work will know that I even connect that to the Christian idea of the Holy Spirit. That to me, this concept of the spirit of rebellion is, in fact, is very, very similar to what the Christians refer to in regard as the Holy Spirit. Jack Trout said, though, in his book of Positioning, The Battle for Your Mind, he said the same person constantly analyzes the world of reality and then changes what's inside his or her head to fit the facts. That's an awful lot of trouble for most people. Besides, how many people want to constantly change their opinions to fit the facts? It's a whole lot easier to change the facts to fit your opinions. Unsane people, it's a very important word, it's different than insane. Unsane people make up their minds and they find the facts to verify their opinions. Or even more commonly, they accept the opinion of the nearest expert. And we in the research community are here to drum it into your mind. You are the expert. There is no bloody expert. And if you put somebody on a pedestal, expect a kick in the teeth, eventually. It's as simple as that. And then they don't have to bother about the facts at all. And I think that sums it up. But one of the other reasons why we don't know this is that there is a highly funded, actively existing campaign, open and hidden campaign of prohibition and suppression. Avram Manhattan, an expert on Vatican intrigue, wrote, I think in the 1960s, pagan temples were either closed, transformed into Christian shrines, or demolished. Their properties were summarily added to the church's patrimony. The wealth of sundry religions were mercilessly expropriated. Their clergy dismissed or persecuted when not civilly or even physically obliterated. Helen Ellery, in her book, the fine book, The Dark Side of Christian History, says that after Christians have spent years destroying books and libraries, St. John Chrysostom, the preeminent Greek father of the church, proudly declared every trace of the old philosophy and literature of the ancient world has vanished from the face of the earth. Proudly. Burning libraries, cutting up priestesses, right? Murdering, killing. Active suppression. It's not by accident that the ignorance factor exists in the world and that the consensus is believed. We have a Leviathan actively and open. I don't want that to generate fear or paranoia in anybody. It is a simple statement of a fact. There is a tiger hiding in the long grass. But a match, the hunter knows that you light one match and the camouflage is gone. And suddenly that skulking, vile creature is exposed. But this, never forget, in my work I try to stress this so much, it's very important to study all these different permutations, of course, in the political world, in the economic world, in the religious world, but let us never ever forget that ultimately the war is a psychic one. It is a war on consciousness. That needs never to be forgotten, even though it takes many forms. We spoke a little earlier about these, the Orwellian doublespeak and how right it is, and I just want to give you one example. We're going to be talking a little bit later on about the Aryan, but let me just use it as an example now, as an example of this Orwellian doublespeak. There's all the difference in the world between an Aryan migration and an Aryan invasion. Right? You take one word and you twist it round, and suddenly let's just talk even about the north of India, where it's accepted that there was something called an Aryan invasion, right? But then they pick up the evidence and find that all these people on the Saraswati and Sindh River were living happily side by side. That there was, in fact, Northwesterners who lived in India. And they are known in Indian culture. Don't believe all the latest propaganda. It is accepted and understood that such people existed. But the British Israelite coterie and the rest of the propagandists did this. They just take the word, think about it, they take the word in migration, which implies something completely different. And you just put the word invasion in there, and then you've got evil Aryans butchering everybody. Those evil invaders. You see how it's done? And there's so many other examples of this. Tacitus said, if you want to rule the whole world, does it follow that everyone else welcomes enslavement? To robbery, slaughter, plunder, they give the lying name freedom. They make a wilderness and call it peace. This is this process, which has so many permutations. But we move on now and look at this concept of Atlantis. Again, a little overview of what we know about it. It's mentioned in every culture under different names. And it's been accepted now that it's probably geologically impossible for an island to actually sink under the waters like we've traditionally understood. They're not writing it off completely, but it's more like that if Atlantis did in fact exist in the Atlantic Ocean area, that maybe some of the land masses are part of Atlantis. So there's all these certain, theories. But the names are also fascinating and interesting to look into. Professor Tolkien, people are familiar with his work, he referred to it as Numenor. But anyone can see that he was referring to the pre-Diluvian civilizations of Lemuria and Atlantis. The story of Lemuria is very old, right? All the way back in the most earliest of the Irish legends, the Gaelic legends or the legends, you have the 4 sacred islands from which they came. Because they're saying that first there was a great cataclysm, a deluge, and then the ancestors of the Gaels, the ancestors of the Irish, the great godlike people, came to Ireland, but they say they came from 4. They don't just say one island like Atlantis, like we traditionally understand. They spoke of at least 4 different islands. Phalius, Murius, Phineus, and Glorious, to be precise. And one of those words is very interesting, is it not? Murias. Murias, just like the French today have the L serving as an English the. Right? Like the word Lazarus. The word L was often used just as a the, in exactly the same way as used today in French. So, taking that further, what happens if the L was the Murias, Lemuria, right? Is the Gaelic Murias. The etymology shows you something intriguing there. But it's the Irish talking about it. That's the main thing to understand. Now we move to Ireland itself. Edward Spencer, a writer, British government official in Ireland, he said that the Irish are one of the most ancient nations that I know of at this end of the world, and are from as mighty a race as the world ever brought forth. Edmund Curtis, in 1922, said that the traditions of the Irish people are the oldest of any race in Europe, north and west of the Alps, and they themselves are the longest settled on their own soil. Peter Beresford, he said in his book, The Druids, the Irish system is the oldest surviving complete codified legal system in Europe, with its roots in ancient Indo-European custom and not in Roman law, and is therefore the oldest surviving Celtic system of jurisprudence. Daniel Pinchback says that historians and archaeologists have biased us to think of prehistoric or pre-modern cultures as societies of scarcity. This was certainly not the case in ancient Britain, as they had the time as well as the determination to plan and build their enormous outdoor temples, constructed from 5,000 to 10,000 stone circles over a 1,000-year period. The word Ireland comes from Ari land, or Arya land. Yeah, the I-R-E is a translation, meaning land of the Arya or the Aryans. In Indo-European language, it is Alyan, meaning the Lord, the land of the lords or the land of the gods. The letter A was transposed, of course, to either interchangeable. And so we have Eri or Era